we're going to be covering the European Accessibility Act. We are going to be joined with a special guest. Actually, we got two special guests, but one is I'm considering a bit more special because they're from Deque, our partner on accessibility, and I will give a brief introduction. So my name is Jason Baum. I am the Senior Director of Developer Relations, Developer Marketing for Sauce Labs, and super excited to be joined by Rachel Yomtoob from Deque and Marcus Merrell, our Principal Technical Advisor. Why don't you give yourselves like a little brief introduction, and then we can go right in.
I'll take it away. I'm Rachel Yomtoob. My pronouns are they, them. I am the product owner for DevTools Mobile at Deque. So I've been working in digital accessibility for over 5 years, and I'm super passionate about mobile app accessibility. And I'm excited to talk to y'all about the European Accessibility Act today here with my partners at Sauce Labs, Marcus and Jason.
Hi, I'm Marcus Merrell. I come from the testing side. I've been in automated testing and quality assurance for over 25 years at this point. Oh, my goodness. And so I'm still a lay person in terms of speaking about accessibility, but it's a deep topic of passion for mine, just because of my tiny little intersection with accessibility, having eyesight troubles, and that opened up a world of information for me about accessibility 3-4 years ago. And so super excited to have the partnership with Deque, and very happy to talk about the EAA today.
Awesome. Thank you, Rachel and Marcus. So let's dive right in. We're going to talk about accessibility. We're going to talk about some different reasons why you should be incorporating accessibility into your applications. And I think it's important that we state the very first reason is it's the right thing to do. At its core, accessibility is about ensuring that everyone, regardless of abilities, can access your app. And why wouldn't you want that? So, Rachel, maybe you could tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, let's dig into the details about, why it's the right thing to do. So first of all, I want to talk about what is disability. Right here on the screen, I have the definition from the CDC. So it reads, a disability is any condition of the mind or body, in parentheses, impairment, that makes it more difficult for the person with the condition to do certain activities, in parentheses, activity limitation, and interact with the world around them, in parentheses, participation restrictions. So this definition is really reflective of the medical model of disability. There's sort of two models that we think of when it comes to disability. The medical model puts sort of the onus of the disability on the person and kind of says the person has a problem and we need to fix the problem. And this is kind of what you see illustrated in this definition from the CDC. However, the social model of disability, which I prefer to think about, is more related to we live in a society and have created a society that is not flexible enough or not malleable enough for all of the different types of people that we have in the world and all of the different abilities. So the social model really says we need to do better as a society to it be inclusive of people with disabilities, where the medical model says, the person with a disability has a problem and we need to figure out how to fix it. And so my kind of overall statement here is that the word disability doesn't inherently need to be a negative term. So even if you're just looking at the word itself, the prefix dis doesn't have to have a negative connotation. One meaning of this in the English definition is to twain, which literally means in different directions. So I have a quote here from Lawrence Carter Long that being disabled does not suggest a lack of anything. Think about disability in the way that people have different abilities and not people have a lack of abilities. So now that we understand those two definitions of the models of disability, I want to dig into the different types of disabilities or impairments. And so on the left here, I have a bullet point that is sort of the different type of ability that is affected. So we can have things like visual, hearing, speaking, cognitive, neurodivergency, so things like ADHD and autism, mobility or motor impairments. Those are all the different types and how they affect the person's abilities. And then we also have the three kind of categories of how long the disability affects the person. So it may be permanent, so affecting someone their whole life, or temporary. An example may be breaking a bone and being in a cast for a certain amount of weeks, or even situational, where maybe in a loud environment, and so it's difficult to stay engaged in the conversation that you're in because all of the loud noise in the background is distracting to you. Or you may be holding a baby or holding a stack of books or whatever it may be, and you only have access to one arm to open a door. I just really want to highlight that, everyone does experience disability at some point or other in their life. And so it's important to think about it from that point of view, and that it's not just like we're not only thinking about people that are very unique cases of severe disability. Disability can affect anyone. So now bringing that full circle into the digital world, what is digital accessibility? It is the practice of building digital content such as web and mobile apps in a way that allows access for everyone, regardless of any disabilities. So this can cover a wide range of concepts such as screen readers. So for people who are visually impaired or blind, screen readers allow them to access digital content. There's captions for videos and color schemes, all sorts of different concepts for accessibility. And then I just want to iterate that you may see an acronym or a numerim for accessibility, which is A11Y, where there's the capital A and then 11 letters in between for the word accessibility. So that's a common nickname that you'll see out there in the wild for digital accessibility. And then while I did focus a lot on the social model of accessibility and the social model of disability and how it affects everyone at some point in their life, we do have some statistics around it, which is an estimated 1.3 billion people experience significant disability, which represents 16% of the world's population, or 1 in 6 of us.
So those are huge numbers. And I think getting into this slide, accessibility about users, I was about to say something about huge market potential of 87 million. But that number you just gave, Rachel, what was it? 16% of the world's population? I mean, that is huge market potential as well that we're talking about when we're talking about incorporating accessibility and what that could mean for your business. When you consider that almost 20% of Europe's population have a disability. And to put that in perspective, while average conversion rate on retail website is typically 2 to 3%, that underserved group represents a significant opportunity for growth for your business. That multiplier effect is also a huge consideration here. When you consider that a visually impaired mother, for example, searching for a holiday trip and purchasing gifts for her entire family, not just for herself, amplifying that impact of each transaction. However, when consumers with disabilities are unable to complete that transaction due to accessibility barriers, they'll just buy from your competitor. So the same can have a negative impact. So the loss is even greater when you factor in that over 70% of websites have critical accessibility issues for blind users. So it's not just an ethical obligation. Accessibility is about quality and meeting users where they are and ensuring an inclusive experience. And so now to tell us a bit more about that, I'd like to turn it to Marcus.
Cool. Well, I've crafted kind of an extreme example of to try to illustrate the point of the business opportunity in front of you around accessibility. So imagine you are in a kind of a crowded market. There's 8, 10 other competitors, and you've been there for a while. You've been healthy, growing. You've captured a fair amount of the market. You've got 21%. This is a result of diligence and good marketing, good presence, everything. But one thing you've also done is you recognize that accessibility is very important to build into your product, and you've also taken advantage of some of the side effects you get out of accessibility around being able to do testing better, being able to instrument your code for better usage in general. Well, the amazing thing that's happened is you did this, but the rest of the market didn't, except for one up-and-comer competitor, F. You see that in that inner circle, in that inner disk, that's 16% of the market that requires assistive technology in order to be able to use your software. You own now like 80% of that market, maybe 90% of that market, because you were the only one taking care of this, and you boxed your competitors out because they never paid attention to this. So the opportunity for you to capture a large percentage of that 15%, 16% of the market that requires assistive technology, it's enormous. Where else in the world can you just give yourself access to that kind of numbers without wholesale change to your business or release of a brand new net new product? So the counterpoint to this is that, what if you're not competitor A? What if you're competitor B? You own 26% of the market. You don't have any access to any part of this inner ring here. So it's pretty compelling when you think about it that way. And we've got a poll here that we want to go through and talk about what are the challenges that you face right now.
All right, let's take a look at the results. Okay, so between limited resources or budget and lack of in-house accessibility expertise, for the most part, sort of make up those. They're closely split. Are you surprised by any of these, Rachel, Marcus?
Well, I think we should probably just briefly read them out for anyone who might need that.
Yeah,
so
sure.
7 out of 23 said that it's limited resources or budget. 3 said difficulty testing across devices and platform. 2 said challenges with automating accessibility tests at scale, which is interesting. And then 2 said unsure about where to start. But the biggest answer, 39%, 9 people said lack of in-house accessibility expertise, which I do think is interesting. I think that it's, so to me, I want to get Rachel's take, but I think it's interesting that only 2 out of 23 are unsure where to start. I figured more people would be unsure where to start. And then I'm also surprised that the biggest number is lack of in-house accessibility expertise. So Rachel, what's your take?
Yeah, I agree. I was also surprised that few people were unsure about where to begin, but that's, I think, good. I'm glad to hear that people kind of know where they want to go and where they're headed in terms of accessibility on their journey. Which I guess, speaking of accessibility journey, I think that's how I kind of incorporate in-house accessibility expertise. It is a journey to build that in-house expertise, right? So it is interesting. Of course, as a digital accessibility vendor, we're the ones that kind of can come in and help you out when you don't have that expertise. But what I do think is important is one of the things we do at Deque is provide trainings and strategic consulting so that you can build that in-house expertise. We're not trying to just always be there for you. We want to help you build a sustainable accessibility program.
Awesome. Thank you, Rachel. Thank you, Marcus. So that brings us to number 3, avoid legal and financial risk. And nobody wants to get sued, right? That's the bottom line. You don't want to be subjected to fines. And coming very soon in June of 2025 is the European Accessibility Act. And Rachel, you're going to tell us a bit more about that.
Yeah, thank you, Jason. So this is what's been super hot in the digital accessibility legal landscape. So this new law, the European Accessibility Act, goes into effect on June 28th, 2025. And it is legislation for digital products and services in all of the 27 EU member states. So any enterprise that works or exists within the 27 EU states, or any enterprises that are global and sell products and services in the EU. So even if you don't operate, your headquarters aren't in the EU, but you sell products or you do business in the EU, you have to comply to this law by June of 28, 2025. And so now breaking it down into what exactly we need to know about the EAA. So what services are affected? All support services need to be accessible. So this is including your help desks, your customer support, your training materials, and compliance procedures. And then we also need to have information about the services readily available to people that need that. So that includes how your service or product functions, how it operates, and the explanation of how the accessibility features work. And then 3, the expected compliance standards in the EAA is EN 301549, which includes WCAG 2.1 AA. So I know that was a bunch of acronyms and numbers that I threw at you. So the TLDR, WCAG 2.1, the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines is the most widely adopted accessibility guideline standard in the world. So it makes sense that that is what the EU is also adopting. And EN 301549 is a previous directive that laid out accessibility guidelines in Europe, but did not define any fines or repercussions for not adhering to the guidelines. So that's what the EAA does, is it takes the EN 301549, which is also referencing WCAG, and is now enforceable by June 28, 2025. And then lastly, your accessibility program needs to be sustainable going forward. So this means many member states have additional requirements beyond just the WCAG conformance that relate to a sustainable digital accessibility program. And then lastly, I want to list off all of the services and products that are in fact covered. So for our services, we have e-commerce, banking, phone services, websites, and mobile apps that are used for transactional services, electronic tickets like for concerts, ebook providers, access to audio-visual media services, as well as the European emergency calls, the 112. And then in terms of products, we have computer and operating systems, smartphones, and other communication devices, TV equipment related to digital television services, ATMs and payment terminals, again, ebooks and e-readers, and then ticketing and check-in machines, such as maybe at the airport. It just about covers anything you can think of when it comes to a digital hardware or software that you interact with.
Yeah, it's pretty much when in doubt, it's covered. I feel like they covered quite a bit. Okay, so we're going to go to another poll now, and it's up on your screen. How would you describe your organization's current status on accessibility regulations? On accessibility regulations such as the EAA. And here's the answer. Wow, this one's a bit more lopsided between these two. So the answers here, and I'll read them aloud. 10 out of 19 said, or 53% said we are aware and actively working toward full compliance. And 37% said we are aware but plan to take action soon or in the near future. And wow, just 5% were not aware but would like guidance, and just 5% said accessibility is not currently a top priority. All right, this one's interesting. Rachel, Marcus, what do you think?
It's a good mix. I feel like, we have to recognize that the people who showed up to this webinar
Sure.
might have a slightly different, result than the general population. But I do think I'm very glad to see that someone who is here, whose organization has not prioritized it, has at least decided to take their time out to come to this and get started to figure it out, because they might be in a unique position to be able to go and be Chicken Little at their place and warn them that the sky is indeed falling.
That's right.
Yeah, I think Marcus summed up my thoughts exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So then moving on, let's get started. So how can we get started, Rachel?
So we've got 5 steps here to achieve compliance. One is to conduct comprehensive accessibility audits and remediate. So this involves doing a manual assessment with the assistive technologies to find any accessibility issues and document them and then go and fix them. And then we also have step 2, which is to supply role-based training to all relevant teams. So I think this is what we saw in the poll earlier about people that are looking for in-house expertise. This is how you're going to build that expertise, is to provide trainings to specific people based on their specific role for accessibility. And then we'll pass it over to Marcus for the last 3 steps.
Well, I think it's very important to understand that, different mobile devices have very different, resolutions and screen types and brightness levels and all sorts of different instrumentation underneath. If you think about an iPhone 7, there's only a certain level of operating system you can upgrade it to before it's sort of maxed out, and you can't upgrade it anymore. So everything you do has to be inside the app itself. And consider also that people who are a little bit older are the people who are probably still using the iPhone 7 and who have issues with visual disabilities. So you need to understand that you can't just test on the iPhone 14 and assume that you're covered. You got to be able to go backwards a few generations. You also have to do it on multiple platforms, and you have to understand that, if you raise the universal font size on a phone, it's going to affect how nearly every font shows up in anywhere in the app. And I have issues with this. Here's a fun test for yourself. Just go and change the accessibility font size on your phone and launch half a dozen apps and see how badly they all do. Because even some of the most professional, some of the most widely available apps on the market, for some of the biggest companies in the world, once you get into it, you see that they didn't plan for people to scale their fonts. So you need to be able to test across many devices, across platforms, across operating systems, across multiple versions of the app, and make sure that you're compliant in all those different cases, or you're going to leave someone behind. You should partner with accessibility experts, hire consultants, talk to your friends, read articles, and just the standard set of things you do in order to gain expertise in any field. But there are experts out there and they can help. And then maintain the production versions of your apps, monitor remediation progress, iterate to improve your program and your processes. Make sure that you are making quality software. And if you start from accessibility, from here on out, then you are automatically instrumenting your app for quality as well as for accessibility.
Let's talk through a couple examples of accessibility issues that we kind of think of as kind of low-hanging fruit, easy fixes, easy wins. One of those would be alternative text. So on the web, whenever you use an image, you see that there's an attribute, or maybe you are not aware, but there's an attribute called alt, which is short for alternative text. And this is the text that would be announced to screen reader users when they activate that image. So if someone's visually impaired and they cannot see the image on the screen, but the information of that image is still important, it should be provided in the alternative text. On this slide, we also highlight that alt text is also valuable for other things, such as search engines and broken images. So if your image CDN is down and it's not being hosted, the text in the alternative text is also displayed there. So that's one example of an accessibility issue that's pretty easy to find and fix. Another one is target size. And here we have a screen or an image of someone using a mobile device, because I find that target size is most impactful on the mobile format, where you're using a finger to touch and interact with the device as opposed to a mouse pointer. And so in this image, we have someone using a phone, and you can see that their thumb is the estimated touch size. And we're kind of highlighting the fact that the thumb is quite larger than the checkboxes that are included on the screen. And so it's important to maintain a specific target size that is large enough that your users will not inadvertently interact with the wrong controls. And there is a success criteria in WCAG for both of these two examples that I highlighted here. So for example, one of the criteria for target size is 44 by 44, but there are varying levels of that. So when I mentioned earlier, there's level AA, there's also level A and AAA. So I won't bore you with all of the details of the numbers, but that is an important criteria, especially for mobile.
Yeah, I think an important part of that thumb target issue is that you could just tell by looking at it. This is classic. I did a web page and then I put it on the phone, and I didn't think at all about how to make that transition and make it work better in the context of the phone screen. And I think this is a prime example of how you sort of get yourself into trouble by just thinking this is going to be the same between one platform and the next, right?
Yeah, that's a great call out, Marcus. Thank you.
Yeah. So the other thing that you can do is, if you don't have access to a wide variety of phones at your office, some people build out these giant racks of phones, and they have to go buy all the things, maintain all the things. Instead, I think you do yourself a favor by selecting a cloud provider such as Sauce Labs, where you can essentially rent somebody else's phone for a little while, test your app, test your web page, make sure that you can go through and see it on all different phones, all different older iOS combinations and Android OS combinations and everything like that.
So
Yeah.
Marcus, can you and Rachel, maybe you could walk us through this slide a little bit, and with Marcus starting, and then Rachel, you could
Sure.
follow.
Sure. Well, Sauce Labs has a warm and trusting relationship with Deque. We've been in contact for a very long time, and we work really, really well together. We have offered Deque users the ability to scale up the usage of tools for testing accessibility through our cloud, our mobile device cloud. And we offer huge breadth and depth of devices so that you can test both across devices and operating systems, as well as do it at scale. So you can, if you need not only an iPhone, but a whole lot of iPhones of a particular version, we've got them, both real and simulated. We also have enterprise grade stability and security that we've built into this platform, purpose built for the idea that you need to be able to test your stuff in a trusted network where you won't leak any information. Everything is perfectly secure, and that it's purpose built in conjunction with Deque, how we've integrated the tools into our mobile device cloud with their blessing.
Yeah, thank you, Marcus. On the Deque side of things, we bring in our digital accessibility expertise. So part of that is actionable results and remediation guidance. So we're not only going to find the accessibility issues, we're going to provide you the information to you and your developers and your whole team on how to fix those accessibility issues, as well as our deep expertise in WCAG. I mentioned WCAG a couple of times. We do have folks at Deque that are on the W3C committees that work to develop and continue improving the guidelines in WCAG. And so we always seek to bring the accessibility tools that are adhering to the latest and greatest guidelines in the accessibility space.
Awesome. So what's next? What can you do? Well, we actually partnered with Deque on this really great guide to European Accessibility Act compliance. We go into detail there. I highly recommend it. There's the QR code. Get ready for EAA with this compliance doc. It has everything you need to know. And we'll just leave it up for another few seconds so you can go ahead and get your phones and scan the QR code. Great. And then we'll open it up to your questions. All right, we'll start from the top. And I think it's kind of a combo question with someone else who asked, UK, should it be included in the map? Or does this mean that the UK organizations selling their products solely within the UK are outside of this act?
Yeah, I think Marcus might have made a joke, or Jason, I don't remember. Someone made a joke earlier about UK not being part of the EU. And I think actually it's quite an important point to make, is that, yeah, the UK is not part of the EU. So the European Accessibility Act, which is an EU directive, does not apply to the UK. So if you are operating solely within the UK and you don't do any business in the EU, I guess you're in luck. You don't have to build accessible products.
That being
there's a
said,
reason.
I would hope that we just spent a whole lot of time telling you why you should, but
Yeah.
right, you're not going to be fined, in other words.
Yeah. There is a reasonable chance that if you run some sort of a B2C site in the UK, probably being used by folks in the EU. But if government site, something like that, you probably have your own set of standards you need to make sure you look into. But also, once again, if you're not going to do it because it helps your business or because it is just the right thing to do, then keep in mind that these regulations change all the time, and there could very well be a UK version of this coming. Very well.
Yeah, that's an important note. Okay, moving on. That was a great question. What about WCAG 2.2?
Yeah, I think that also, kind of ties into the point of the EAA is pointing to WCAG, which if the UK does create a similar law, it likely would also point to WCAG. But that being said, WCAG 2.2 came out in October of last year, so just about a year ago today, just about a year ago this month. And so that is just taking some time to get, incorporated into the law. But I do know that there is a version 4 of the EN 301-549 directive, which the EAA points to, that is in the works, which will incorporate WCAG 2.2. So as of right now, it's still at 2.1. When that latest version of the EN directive comes out, that's when we'll be at 2.2 for the EAA.
Great, thank you. As part of the EAA, do we have specific guidelines for mobile apps, Android and iOS, like WCAG for web?
Yeah, this is a great question. So WCAG is developed by the W3C, which is a joint organization between various software like giants in the world. So you know your Apples, your Googles, etc. That are all bought into the web experience. So there's a lot of unity there, and that's how we get the WCAG guidelines. We don't have that same kind of joint third-party organization between iOS and Android for mobile apps specifically. So there's no current third-party guideline for accessibility for mobile apps. So what we do is we take WCAG and translate it and thoughtfully interpret it for mobile. And so one of the things with that is I'm going to actually tie back to the WCAG 2.2 that I was speaking of, is there's a task force in the W3C for WCAG 2 ICT, where ICT stands for Information Communication Technologies. So this task force is, its whole focus is how to apply the WCAG guidelines to things other than the web. So that does include mobile apps. And so there's not necessarily specific criteria that are different for mobile apps, or there's not like additional criteria, but there is guidelines or notes on how to apply the guidelines to mobile apps as part of the WCAG 2 ICT document. And they just published the 2.2 version of that, which is going to then be incorporated into version 4 of the EN 301-549 that I just mentioned. So long story short, mobile app guidance is gonna be there. It's a little bit more complex than the web. It's not as straightforward. It takes a lot more like careful interpretation, as I mentioned. And there's not like necessarily one source of truth in the same way that we have with WCAG.
Thank you, Rachel.
Great.
And that was a great question. And thank you, Andrew, who has posted a link in the chat. The UK does have requirement standards. It looks like they're a little older. One is from it's with regarding 2018 and really focused on public sector, and then the Equality Act of 2010. So check it out if that is useful for you. And I just got another question coming in. Do you know if websites which do not sell anything to customers will need to comply with the EAA?
Yeah, that is a good question. First, I do want to highlight, thank you, Andrew, again, for posting that. I think I've seen you before in other accessibility social media or like conferences or things like that. So thank you for sharing, Andrew. And yes, it does specifically apply to public sector for the UK. But going back to the EAA, it is specifically for if you, sorry, so we're talking about internal applications and websites compared to customer facing, right?
Right.
I believe that for compliance, if your company resides in the EU and you are based in the EU, I believe it does then apply to internal services and products. But otherwise, it would be for just your customer facing. So think of kind of like the GDPR. So if you're seeing all the cookie banners all over the web now, it's similar to that.
I interpreted the question a little tiny bit differently, which is, what if I have information to give to consumers, but I'm not actually selling them anything? So I'm just thinking about, a different kind of situation where I'm trying to get information out. I'm an information resource. I'm a news outlet. I'm not actually selling anything. Do I still get held to the EAA standard? That's how I interpreted that question. And if that's wrong, then we can still answer it.
No, that's a good question. I'm not familiar enough with that specific nuance.
Yeah, my instinct is that yes, if you have information to give that is critical for people, then yes,
Yeah.
you're probably going to be held to the same. That's my guess. It's not legal advice, but it just feels like, and also, by the way, it's the right thing to do and it's good for your business. So, yeah.
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 Actually, maybe that's a good disclaimer, is that we're not lawyers, so none of this is legal advice.
Yeah.
Yes, I think that's important to note. So please don't consider this webinar now. You have been completely compliant and understand the laws via the law. We are not lawyers. I also want to note that I thought Andrew had sent that to the complete chat. I'm sorry, Andrew sent that to the panelists. I have no idea why, but I cannot share that link with you here in the chat. So either Andrew can
Yeah, me either.
repeat it, or we'll definitely send it to you following the webinar.
You did it.
What's that?
You did
And
it.
there you go. Thank you, Andrew. Appreciate that. Look at this, real time. Andrew, would you? No, I'm just kidding. I was going to offer you a role in the next webinar. Okay, how immediate is the enforcement going to be?
Yeah, so it's going to be pretty immediate. So even if you're maybe just now hearing about this act, it actually was signed into law, I believe, in 2019. So the 2025 date is actually like the 5-year grace period that was announced when the law went into effect. So that the June 28 is like that's when enforcement is starting.
Yeah, we believe that every one of the 27 member states has their own enforcement mechanism and penalty roster, and it is yet unknown how aggressively and how they're going to enforce these, and to what extent. But be on the safe side. Feels like you should at least have a plan. My bet is that if someone comes after you and says we're going to threaten you with a fine, if you have a plan that you can show them, you'll probably be able to to delay that or get yourself a little bit more grace. But if you haven't thought about it, if you're just ignoring the problem, then I'd be careful.
Yeah, and once again, that's not something we could truly advise, but I think it's important to note. And yes, it's a little bit of homework on your end to find that out, as each European state's completely different enforcement.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, I just did want to add to that point about each European state or each country enforcing it differently. The directive does mandate that the penalties must be, in quotes, effective, proportionate, and dissuasive. So that's the verbiage that those countries are each going to be leaning on, I guess, when they are creating their individual policies.
Great. Yeah, and this next question that came in is kind of following the same thing. Any pointers on how the compliance with EAA will be monitored?
I feel like Rachel might have a different idea here, and once again, not legal advice, but I think we could take kind of a chapter from the GDPR and say it's probably going to be citizen reported, citizen enforced, not monitored by some agency sitting on high. That's my bet.
Yeah, I agree. Probably that does make sense, that it would likely be more of a citizen reported. However, since we are talking about the UK, they do have a monitoring model, and they have a great blog post, which I can't remember if Andrew actually may have written that blog post. But the UK does have a great monitoring system for their public sector bodies. So if the EU does lean towards that way, maybe they would reference what the UK has done. I don't want to speculate too much, but
Interesting. Yeah, Andrew, if you wrote that blog post and you have it readily available, feel free to add it to the chat. Otherwise, we'll do our homework and we'll try and find that blog post that Rachel is referencing, so we can hopefully include that in the materials if it's relevant to you in the UK.
I do think that there's a lot to be looked at in the GDPR and how that played out and how it's been enforced and everything. There's probably similarities to how this is going to go. That's just my bet, pure speculation.
Yeah. Well, we have a couple minutes. If we want to continue the Q&A, if they, okay, nope, not Andrew. We have
not
confirmed.
Andrew, must have been someone else.
Thank you, Andrew. Great. Well, I don't see any other questions coming in. So I'm going to start wrapping up. I'm going to give you one more second. Okay. Yep. I'm going to wrap up. There
Jason,
you go.
if you don't mind, could I shout out an upcoming DQ event about the
Absolutely.
EAA that we're
Please.
hosting? Yeah. So November 19th, we're going to do a live event from The Hague in the Netherlands with a professor and Matthew from Nestle. So we've got a bunch of other EAA related events coming up from DQ. So I'm going to put a link in the chat if you're interested in learning more about the EAA from us as well. But we also appreciate being invited to do this event with Sauce Labs too. So we're excited to get the word out any way we can.
And Rachel, I just noticed for some reason.
It went to the host and panelists.
Yeah, we're not able to share. So what we'll do is we'll include that link with the follow-up materials as well. And it looks like the folks who are running this, there we go. And now it's to everyone.
Thanks, Joanna.
So there's that link. Thank you, Joanna. And yeah, thank you so much, Rachel and Mark. And Rachel, by the way, that event sounds amazing. And I wish I could go. Thank you so much, Rachel. Thank you so much, Marcus, for leading us today on this webinar. And thank you for joining us. There's a lot more to come, I feel like, between now and June 28th, 2025. I'm always so tempted to say June 25th. So please, look for more materials from us, look for more materials from DQ. You can always reach out to us, or our businesses directly. They'll have our information, and we would love to talk to you if you have continued questions for us. And thank you so much for your time.